there are here. So hello everyone. It's a great pleasure to introduce Olivia Casagrande, who I met when she was a visiting PhD student from the University of Verona, right? She was doing her PhD, and we had several students from the University of Verona who came to Manchester Anthropology. And did you in those days come to the CLACS seminars?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, good. That's good to know. So yeah, long-standing connection with anthropology and with the CLACS Centre. And then Olivia, after her PhD, got a Marie Curie postdoc, which she also did in our department with Andrew Irving as her mentor, which involved kind of continuation of the investigating Mapuche people in the city of Santiago. And I guess in a way, the work that we're going to present now, the book that we're going to present, which is this one, is a kind of ultimately a combination of that work you did in your postdoc in the Marie Curie and subsequent work, right? Yeah. Anyway, so that's what it is, and it's a great pleasure to introduce you.
Yeah, thanks. And we also have Valentina Bonifacio with us, who's gonna comment on the book, and she's an associate professor at the University of Venice, and also did her PhD here a few years ago. So thank you, Valentina, for that. So how we thought about the presentation today is to have a brief outline by myself of the book, of the work that has been done to get to the book, and then have Valentina asking a few questions and dialoguing with me about the book, and then have a final half-hour comment, discussion, and questions. Are the people seeing the PowerPoint?
No, you have to share that screen.
I have to share that.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just go click on more. So on the bottom of that window, more.
Yeah.
And click on share screen, and then click on the one, that one, yes. Yes, that's the one.
So not the whole
well,
screen, but then if I need
then they'll see the whole screen.
Oh.
So if you want to show the internet, then you have to stop share and change it.
And change it.
It's up to you. I mean, you can also share your screen, but then maximize the PowerPoint, but then you won't be able to see anything else.
No, it's fine. I will share this, and maybe we skip the internet bit. I can do it without.
You can just stop and share your screen.
Yeah. Okay.
You can make that bigger if you want, that window.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Good. So we can start. If I don't know if in the meantime people want to have a look at the book, okay, actually pass it. Thanks. Okay, so hello everyone. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for being here or there in the virtual room. So what I'm going to present today is the result of a few years' work. The book has been published by Manchester University Press in August, actually the 31st of August this year. And is, as Pete was mentioning, the result of mainly my Marie Curie fellowship, which lasted from 2017 until 2021, more or less. And it focused on the urban indigenous youth in Santiago de Chile, and involved a group of young Mapuche artists and activists living in the Chilean capital, engaging with the stories of their families' migration to the city and their own experiences of the city. So the idea was to engage with different time frames as well, and different generations that had been living in the Chilean capital. And we did that through different creative methods, including art and performance, and as you will see, and the book is the result of that as well. So it brings together text, visuals, and also audio materials and video materials that are stored in the website that I hope will be able to show you in a bit. So the project mainly focus on what it meant to be in the city and how to relate with this kind of space in a way that I think is very much summarized in this quote that was from Rodrigo Gonçalves Pardo, and where he was sharing this sense of belonging to a space that in theory in Chile is considered non-indigenous and non-Mapuche, but actually the claim to belong to this kind of space was very much at the center of the project. So the project involved, as you can see here, and that are also among the authors of the book, around 15 Mapuche youth. And the editors of the book were myself, Claudio Alvarado Lincopi, and Roberto Cayuca Martinez. Claudio is a Mapuche historian, and he's finishing his PhD in urban studies now. And Roberto Cayuca Martinez is a Mapuche theater director, performer, and actor. So these were mainly the disciplines that we brought together in this work. So today I would like to start by explaining a little bit the way the narrative within the book was constructed. The two main results of the project in 2018 were, as you can see here, an art exhibition, which entailed 11 artworks. Of them, 7 were individual works and 4 were collective works, and 1 performance. I will mainly focus on the performance today, but we will also see a bit of the artworks, and the artworks are contained in the book. So what I want to do is to jump a little bit between the different materials that are gathered not only in the text but also in the website, to give you a sense of how this work was taken forward and how the multimodality of the work was then reproduced into the book, which was probably one of the most challenging things. The other aspect that I think it's important to underline is that this work was collaborative from the start. So this meant that actually when I got there, we can maybe talk about this a little bit more later, I had an idea in mind, which was basically participatory mapping and visual interviews and visual storytelling. But this idea was completely changed once we started working together. So the project was very much appropriated by the people I was working with, and that's where performance and art came in, which I hadn't planned in my initial proposal at all. So the book was conceived the same way as a collaborative book. So this meant shifting and working through different kind of authorship. So from collective authorship, which are the main chapters are collective, and in some individual creation in the artwork that are also reproduced in the book, and also in some of the chapters. So this meant a lot of work also in terms of translation, because of course people were writing in Spanish, and also to negotiate different kind of positionalities within the book. As I was reflecting as well in the introduction, sometimes our use of the we sounds a bit weird, because every time we have to think about who is the we that we are talking about, depending on the chapter you're into, which is also interesting, I think, because it reflects the ambiguity of this kind of work. So that said, this is a rough, I mean, not rough, it's actually the contents of the book. And I just wanted to show how the book is constructed around both specific places and the site-specific performance that we did. So every main chapter in the first half of the book has the performance script at the end. So it's actually possible to read the script throughout the different chapters. At the same time, the book is constructed as a sort of map. So around 4 specific places that we had chosen to be part of the performance first and then of the book, because the way we worked in the city was very site-specific. First, because this is what we were actually interested into exploring, like the different experiences of different spaces within the city from a Mapuche perspective. And also because Roberto's main field of expertise is precisely site-specific performance and theater. So he was really leading in that sense, that side of the work, and he was proposing a lot of exercises even before working on the final performance. We worked in a lot more places than the one that you see here, but at some point we had to choose which places we wanted to focus on. And after much deliberation, we decided to focus basically on the central part of the city. Because the aim of the group, even if they came from the periphery, and we have been working a lot in the periphery as well, their interest was actually to claim the city center as their own, and to have their presence displayed there, and to work with this kind of spaces that were more difficult to address for many reasons, from racism to class issues, and also other kind of urbanistic reasons, because Santiago is very much constructed as a city that has two sides, as many other cities. One is the kind of the upper class and white side, and the rest of the periphery, especially, is more kind of different kind of belonging. So these were the 4 places. We are going to go through them in a minute, and I also wanted to show the map of the performance. This is how the performance goes, and how the book as well goes. The performance was a 3.5-hour tour throughout the city, and it was made of different kinds of actions. So there were theatrical scenes in the 4 points that you see there, and then there were the traveling between them. During the traveling between them, people were listening to audio recorded bits that were storytelling, songs, traditional songs or contemporary songs, and also radio. Well, we will have a couple of examples later. And so we traveled this bit by metro, and this the yellow one with bus that we rented. And we went through these different specialities together with the public that was organized in small groups. Mostly, I mean, at most we had 30 people, more or less. So the first station, as Roberto used to call it, and also the first chapter of the book, is related to beginnings and to a space that the group identified as the place of origin of the Mapuche diaspora in the city, because it was a park where their parents and grandparents used to hang out after they migrated, and where they fell in love and formed family and had their festivities and their parties, and it was a place of joy, basically, which is the Quinta Normal Park. In the same place, in the 1960s, Carlos Munizaga, which was a Chilean anthropologist, actually made a research on urban Mapuche in the city, and focusing on the way they were basically adapting and being assimilated into Chilean society. And this work was also composed of different photographs, many photographs. You see one there, the one on your left. But the study kept anonymous the people in it, and didn't mention the place where this was staged. It was only called El Jardín, the garden. And so the main aim of the workshop that we did there before setting up the performance, etc., was to actually find exact spots where the photographs had been taken, and to reproduce them with the bodies of the youths of today, of Mapuche youths of today. And you see the example there, and then you see how in the performance that was also used as a starting point, and actually the starting point of the whole story is about a Mapuche couple announcing to their friends that they will have a baby and they will settle down in the city. and talking about the problems and difficulties of that. And we see above, like, the exercise of actually finding the right place and playing with the photograph. This also resulted in one of the artworks, the collected ones, which are not showing that now because we don't have enough time. Let me see if this, no, this doesn't work. So I'm gonna show you not show you, have you listened to the audios later than all at once, because if I have to come out of the PowerPoint, it's probably going to be easier. But here is basically where people started their journey and had their headphones on for the first time and were told about the research we had been doing and how we wanted to tell the story of the Mapuche migration to the city. The second station was the Plaza de Armas, which is also the second chapter of the book. And the Plaza de Armas is, of course, the place where the colonial city started and where there are monuments, colonial monuments. This is Pedro de Valdivia, the Mapuche conqueror. And we got there through a metro journey in which people were listening to an audio that was paralleling the 11th of September of 1973, where Pinochet realized the coup, and another 11th of September in the 16th century, where an indigenous leader attacked Santiago. And the audio was implying that the people should fight with Michimalonco for the city. And I would just...
Plaza de Armas es un lugar donde muchas cosas pueden pasar. Hemos recibido la alerta de que algo está pasando.
Con ustedes, leerá a continuación la proclama de la Junta Militar de Gobierno. Santiago, 11 de septiembre de 1973. Las Fuerzas Armadas y Carabineros de Chile declaran.
Es el 11 de septiembre de 1541 y Michimalonco está quemando Santiago. Pedro de Valdivia anda de excursión al sur y este día 11 de septiembre es ideal para atacar la ciudad, ya que los españoles están sin su capitán general. Necesitamos que seas discreto y pases como un ciudadano normal. Michimalonco va ganando y está sitiando la ciudad para rescatar a 7 de los nuestros que están prisioneros en la Plaza Mayor. Esta es su misión, rescatar a los 7 caciques vivos. Entre ellos está Apumante y Quillacanta, ex gobernador incaico de este valle. Si queremos salvarlos con vida, anda siempre con la mapuchada y trata de pasar desapercibido.
And then, actually, when people disembarked the metro, they were in today's Santiago, and they were told by the audio that actually Michimalonco had lost and Pedro de Valdivia had won. So we have the city that we have today because of that. And in the theatrical scene, there was a Mapuche historian, which here is Claudio, that was trying to narrate the history of the city from the Mapuche point of view. So performing a sort of counter-narrative within the very place where the colonial history is embedded. And he was interrupted by a passing by lady, which was actually one of the actors, that was responding to him and actually claiming that he was just saying things that are not true and reproducing a kind of discourse that it's much related to a lot of stereotypes and racial classification also that are very present in the Chile of today, or at least before the uprising. We can talk about this later. I put there the text. It's very long. There's not possible to actually read it in full, but the interesting thing here is that this was a real speech of a real lady that we encountered during fieldwork. So this is one of the examples in which we use ethnographic research to go back to fictionalize it and actually realize that part of the performance and having another kind of reaction from the audience that can also be analyzed afterwards. So it's almost literal, because by chance I was recording and the person didn't notice, and so we used the transcription, of course, we didn't use the image. And this chapter is very much organized around the concept of colonial recursivity and how there is a colonial continuity that has also to do with how the Chilean state and the Chilean Republic then took this actions on the territories in the south that are labeled from Mapuche scholars as internal colonialism. And so how these different moments in the history of Chile in the 15th century and in the 19th century are actually mirroring one another, and how this is also related to neoliberal multiculturalism and Pinochet dictatorship. So there is a lot of jumping between different times and time frames and different materials at the same time. Here we go to the upper class sector, which is another chapter about the way Mapuche women used to work as what is called nanas or nannies. And here I'm gonna stop share and reshare because I want to need to listen to this audio. Okay. No, I can't do that because if I minimize this.
No, go back to the Zoom.
Okay.
And one on the right.
Okay.
And then more. Yes, and then choose the screen you want to share. Okay.
And here is the route toward the upper class sector.
Ahora ponte cómodo. Nos vamos a dirigir a la intersección de Pedro de Valdivia con Francisco Bilbao. El trayecto durará cerca de 20 minutos. Toma el paño que está en tu asiento. Te servirá en la siguiente estación. Míralo. Ahora no lo entiendes, pero pronto lo entenderás. Y cuando bajes de la micro, llévalo contigo. Estas micros dejaron de circular en febrero del 2007 y estuvieron en circulación por 17 años, desde 1991. Fueron estas micros amarillas las micros de la transición. Recorridos como La Pampilla, Recoleta Liga, Renca Los Morros y Maipú Las Condes trasladaban a miles de santiaguinos desde la periferia al centro y al barrio de Santiago Oriente, la ciudad cuica. Panaderos, empleadas domésticas, obreros de la construcción, estudiantes, jardineros se trasladaban aquí a sus lugares de trabajo. Esta ciudad se ha ido construyendo con el trabajo de sus propias manos. La ciudad está atiborrada de sus relatos de vida, sus tránsitos, alegrías y pesares. Pasos migrantes dentro de la urbe, pasos de Cerro-Navia a Manquehue, pasos de Lautaro a Vitacura, nombres mapuche con sentidos olvidados, Gran Piedra, lugar de cóndores, un canto en la boca de una ñaña arriba de la micro viajando a la casa de su patrona, un canto que aún suena, un hablar que porfía la historia del progreso de esta metrópolis, imán migrante, historia con H mayúscula que se levanta sobre relatos olvidados.
So I'm going to go back to sharing.
Yeah, can you put when you share? Can you put share with sound? So we can hear. I mean,
Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot.
The speakers, but they might get the sound straight from there.
I will, yeah, you're right, I forgot.
So you stop share and put share again. And you are using sound, so stop
Yeah,
share.
probably.
and then share. There on the bottom.
Yeah, okay. Okay, sorry, everyone. So the upper class neighborhood was one of the sites that we researched also through archival research, and the research there was led by Claudio, and was also one of his individual chapters that focuses on this work. And he, through the journal of the housing employee union in the area, he managed to find out the addresses where Mapuche women used to live and work. So that's the map that you saw. And during the research and the workshop, we did this performance that was a sort of tribute to them and their work, which was basically writing their names with chalk on the ground and hanging an apron there, just the time of taking the picture, and then we would take it down. So it wasn't permanent, it was just a moment where this happened. And through this performance, we got a different reaction. Actually, the speech that we've seen before in Plaza de Armas was the result of this action here, when one of the ladies that lived in these houses engaged with that, actually two of them, but one was the speech. And this, here I would like to show you two artworks, and not only the performance, because the performance here was really difficult to realize. First, because we didn't know what we wanted to do, because it was really delicate topic. Many of the participants had their families working in these sectors, and they didn't want to do something too obvious and too explicit. It was a bit of a delicate thing, and also we didn't have a permit from the municipality to do anything there. So in the end, we did something really simple and really just a gesture of gathering on a bridge and having the apron that was hung on the street given there to the person who was guiding the tour. But two of the artworks resulted from there that were in the exhibition. The first one is Como de la Familia, which is the collective work that we did for this performance, and the other one is an individual one that was inspired by this work, which was basically an arpillera made from two of the participants, Marie-Juliette and Marcela Bastinian, that was made with fabrics that they collected from their acquaintances and family that were related to work. And with that, they drew the map of Santiago. So we have panaderos here, we have construction workers, we have domestic workers, we have gardeners, and the clothes that they use to perform the work. Made up this map, claiming how the work of Mapuche migrants actually built the city. The final station was Cerro Huelén. So Cerro Huelén is right in the middle of the city and is a very contested place and complex place, because it's said to be one of the places that were sacred to Mapuche people before the arrival of the Spanish, but it was also used, of course, as happened many times from the Spanish, to build first a church and then various monuments to the nation, including the foundation stone is basically there. So you have different symbols there, and this is very much a place of contestation during manifestation, during political uprising, and one of the interesting things that was also one of the reasons why we set performance there is the terrace of this hill is named after Caupolicán, which is one of the Mapuche leaders of the 16th century, and there is this statue that you cannot see it very well there, but this is Caupolicán, and this is the image of Caupolicán that is most renowned in Chile. They even sell little statues of it, but it's actually a zoo, because the artist that built it was inspired by the last Mohicans at the beginning of the second half of the 19th century, and he tried to sell it after he failed the competition in the United States, but the United States didn't want it because they wanted a statue of a Mapuche person. So he sold it to the Chilean government. And the Chilean government said, of course, you're going to take it and we're going to put it there and just call it Caupolicán. I mean, whatever, it doesn't really matter if it has feathers on his head and length of them. I mean, it's really like, yeah, you probably don't see it from here, but it's really not the iconography of anything related to a future. So the choice of setting the performance there had the meaning to respond to this kind of images and this kind of a representation of indigeneity within the city, but also to play in the city, because from there you basically see the whole Santiago and especially the city center. So at the beginning, we wanted to set the performance ending in the periphery, but then the places that we had chosen actually decided not to participate because one of the elders died, and they had given us the possibility to engage with the ceremonial centers in the periphery. But then because of this death, they were in a mourning period, so they had to pull out. And we were desperate to find another peripheral place, and Mapuche peripheral place. And then at one point the discussion went like, what are we doing? Like, why are we looking for some kind of Mapuche peripheral place within the city? It sounded so kind of not really what the whole work was about, and also a bit vague. I remember Claudia was especially strong in criticizing this kind of choice, and because it meant that basically reproducing that kind of partial spatial division that urbanization, that years and years of urbanization has actually taken forward. So he decided, I mean, the group decided that they wanted to end right in the city center, and I'm just going to show you the ending. Which was basically set in the future.
Somos mapuches de hormigón. Debajo del asfalto duerme nuestra madre explotada por un cabrón. Nacimos en la mierdópolis por culpa del buete cantor. Nacimos en panadería para que nos coma la maldición. Somos de los que quedamos en pocas partes.
Tú no sabes de tormento, Peña y Jesús. Resucita. Resucita, Peña y Jesús. Tú no sabes de tormento ni de dolores. Donde todos lucen cansados. Feudales, todos ellos. Ante la ironía, se esconden tras el caos. Mi ciudad ducal. Una ciudad donde todos lucen cansados.
Quisiera hablarte, Sauce Llorón, y que me des una
Mal,
explicación.
Kurufnam. Ale pelón con tu paeneo, Fashilixilesi punmeo, Wenenetum, ni tumu, ni compayam.
India con nombre de Wendy, morocha y andina, pero andina de las faldas de Santiago, de la cordillera de Peñalolén. Mapuche domo tainche, con cupalme champurreado, de madre chilena y padre mapuche, con tugún guarriache en Santiago y tugún ancestral en el lejano Ancahual, resistente al fuego de esta ciudad, al frío del Gualmapu. Soy la libertad que forjaron mis antiguas.
So this was the, this is basically the first section, the main section of the book. And then there's one section in which among the participants who wanted to write chapter, we wrote it, it's 6 of them. And it is a reflection on their own experiences or their experiences within this project, depending on what angle they decided to take. And then there is a conclusion, which is a dialogue between myself, Roberto, and Claudio, talking about the work we have been doing and the afterwork by Claudio. But I think now this is was just to give you an idea, especially of the different kind of materials we worked on, and how the book is actually a sort of device that should allow you to jump from one thing to the other, because it has links and QR codes that are linked to the website. And so the idea is that the text engages with video, audio, and yeah, visual materials, artwork, and a part of all the analysis and conceptual part, which is also there. But I thought it was more interesting to talk about this now today. And yeah, I think I'm just closing it here and leave Valentina to.
Let me introduce Valentina.
Yeah.
As well. So yeah, Valentina Bonifacio is somebody who did an MA in visual anthropology here. She also did a PhD in social anthropology with visual media here. And she's currently associate professor at the Capital Study Unit University in Venice, where she teaches environmental and visual anthropology. So, her own work has been on indigeneity and urbanism in Paraguay. So she's very kindly agreed to comment on your book. So let's get her up on and see if we can maximize the screen. So, let's stop share first, and then let's have a look.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Hi there.
Thanks, Olivia. Thanks, Peter, for hosting. Good evening to everyone. First of all, I wanted to congratulate Olivia because it's amazing how the performance, she was able to transfer, they were able to transfer the performance in a book. And the result is really good. I have a few questions that I prepared for you. If you hear me well, I'll just read them. Can you hear me properly? Yes, okay. Yes. So my first question concerns your position as a European anthropologist doing research with the Mapuche people in Chile. Claudio Lincopi, who I met with you here in Venice, writes in the epilogue that one of the aims of the Mapuche who participated in the project was to stop being the eternal informants for colonial academia, which is a very strong phrase. And I was really impressed when I met him to see his strong political aversion for anthropology and anthropologists. So given these premises, how did your collaboration happen at all? And how did you negotiate your role as an anthropologist in the project?
Thanks. That's a great question. Yes, with Claudio and Roberto, we presented the book in Venice 3 weeks ago because they were in the UK, so we managed to bring them there and to present it all together. And yeah, and Claudio on aversion to anthropology and anthropology is really strong. That's true, and that's basically the first time I met him. He made it very clear to me, and we had a very I mean, we didn't have a discussion. He made a speech about how much he hated anthropology and anthropologists and why. I mean, it was really a political claim. In Chile, anthropologists and social scientists in general, especially the ones that are from they come from Europe, are called Mapuchographos, which gives you an idea about where the critiques gets to. And so when we met, and I just listened to him, and we met because I wanted to invite him to collaborate on this project, and he was very much interested in the project, but he was strongly critical towards anthropology, as we said. And I honestly couldn't not agree with him. Think about the history of social sciences in Chile and in many other places. So I just listened to him, and then he had to went down from a bus. We were traveling together to the city center, and I just thought, okay, he's never gonna want to collaborate with me. And he thought, that's what he said that day as well. And he thought, okay, she's never gonna call me back. But then I just thought, well, why don't I try again? So I called him and we met again, and he told me, look, first, no interviews. I don't want to be interviewed by you, and I don't want you to use me to be your gatekeeper for other interviews, and I don't want to interview people myself. And I remember something that I think really marked this project. He said, we don't want to be people that describe things to you. We want to interpret things with you. So if you're up to this, fine. Otherwise, I'm not interested. And so he was the one that pushed for the change. He involved Roberto then and pushed for changing the project towards this kind of collaboration, and especially towards this creating things together. That was what interested him the most. Actually, one of the artworks is about our collaboration, the three of us, myself, Roberto, and Claudio. But yeah, maybe if we have time after, I'm going to show it to you.
Thank you. My second question is again on something that Claudio Lincopi wrote in the epilogue of the book, which is a phrase I really liked, but I am still curious about it. So he writes, we mixed knowledge and feelings to the point that interdisciplinarity felt narrow, uninspiring, and nothing like we were doing. Perhaps it makes more sense for us to speak of indisciplinarity. So because he says we, and I assume he includes you in the we, I wanted to ask you something more about this.
Yeah, thanks. I also love that sentence. So yes, he says we because one of the other things that the group asked me to do was to be part of the work and not. I remember especially Roberto at one point as a theater person, when we were starting to work on the performance, he asked me, so what do you want to do? Do you want to be the anthropologist observing the whole thing, or do you want to be my assistant? And I was like, what do you mean? What should I do? What does being an assistant entail? And when he tells this story, he couldn't be here today. They couldn't be here today, so they would say that I was just there with my notebook and pen, like waiting him to tell me what an assistant, a director assistant would actually need to do. And he always laughed at me because of that, because he said, you just have to be on my side and look to things that happens on stage with me and help me understand. So it was very much about being in it, and also within the performance, I was part of it because I was one of the guides with him. So in a way, it was the we meant that we were in this together, and that's also why they insisted that I would write the introduction alone, because I was the one that actually introduced the project there and to them, and so they wanted my voice to be clear and positioned, which I agree with. And then the issue about indisciplinarity is that basically we use different disciplines, not only because of the three of us, but also the participants had different, like some of them were artists, some of them were performance artists. Three of them were just Mapudungun teachers, so they were linguists basically. So they had all different kind of expertise. One was I don't know how you say that in English. The metal worker, like the person that, yeah. So they had different expertise that they shared, and it was really nice how also people use their own expertise to help one another. And there was this constant reflection in collective spaces. But it was very much about what Claudio precisely used to say, is thinking by doing. So the creative exercise was a way of thinking things through and not the other way around. So it was always about using these creative methods and inventions as well that weren't really related to one discipline or the other, or the relationship between them, but it was more chaotic as well. And I think this was the beauty of it. And well, the feeling was, yeah, I mean, working with a small group, because we were 18 people for such a long time, 1.5 years, of course, then brings in personal emotions and stories and issues that go beyond kind of the thinking side of it, but entails the feeling part of it. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll make the third question, then if I have time, I'll make more, otherwise I'll leave the space to the audience. But this is an aspect that I find very interesting, and you made an example of this now in your presentation. So there is this interesting exercise that appears several times throughout the book, and it's an exercise with time and speculation with time, where there are multiple temporalities that collapse into one, and different times seem to coexist in the same space. Again, I'm going to quote from Claudio in the epilogue, because this is the last phrase of the book, and it's very clearly addressing this part, this element. So he says, the reverie is complete when we see that the president of the Constitutional Convention is a Mapuche woman, our Lamgan, Elisa Loncon. Are we in the midst of a surrealist dream of a young Mapuche woman from the 16th century? It is a possibility. So again, I really like this final phrase, wondering if we are the result of imagination of a Mapuche woman from the 16th century. So I wanted to ask you, why is this conflation of time repeating throughout the book, and why is it so important?
Well, sadly, thinking about how the Constitutional Assembly ended, we probably were in a kind of dream. But yeah, we didn't know that when we published the book, of course. So I think there are different elements there. One is certainly political, in terms of how the colonial moment is coming back again and back again and back again in Mapuche history, and how is it also related to, which was something that I didn't address in the presentation, is not the protagonist within the book, but it's part of it, and how it's related to nowadays occupation of the Mapuche indigenous territory, and to the struggles there, and to all the killing that also are happening there in terms of activists and people within the community. Another one I think is very much related, another dimension is related to how site-specific work works, and especially site-specific performance. And so it's really related to Roberta's role, because the idea of, and which I think resonates a lot with anthropological literature on space and place as well. So this idea that places gather, and that places are multidimensional also in terms of time, because they are able to gather different temporalities at the same time. So when you work with space and with places, you are able to connect different times, which is something very difficult to do through text, by the way, because writing is linear. So while when you perform, when you do visual work, then you can actually connect these different temporalities a lot easier and a lot more. And that was something that Roberto used to say, like the specific site where you work into is just the latest version of the ones that were before you and that people engaged into before you. So you have this kind of mobility in terms of temporalities that you can, I think you can really much engage with through art, especially and theater in this case. I think these are the main aspect of it. And then of course, then you can't resist when you have 2 11th of September that are so dense with meaning, and you have to put them together because they talk to one another so well. So yeah.
Thank you, Olivia. Well, I'll have more questions, but maybe I'll wait to see if there's time for that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much, Valentina. I should think that maybe there will be more time, I think so, maybe. But yeah, I'd like to sort of start the discussion here, which is, you know, the kind of the collaborative dimensions of your project are so amazing and so fascinating and so striking that, in a way, it's almost impossible. Well, not almost, but one tends to focus on that rather than on the kind of actual substantive thing, which is about urban indigeneity and, you know, and how important that is. If we're looking at, you know, the way in which indigeneity is looked at by scholars and politicians and so on, right across Latin America, you know, the fact that probably a majority of indigenous people who identify as indigenous now live in urban areas or more, kind of a large majority, I think, and, you know, big cities as well. And yet still, you know, there's this incredibly pervasive and durable connection of indigeneity with rurality. You know, I mean, still in the academic sphere, and certainly in politics and in terms of popular imagination and national narratives and so on and so forth. So, you know, what you're doing is really kind of at the cutting edge of academic approaches of kind of trying to get to grips with urban indigeneity. So, you know, I think it's important to kind of point that out, that amidst all this kind of collaborative stuff, which is very innovative and really interesting, that, you know, that's the kind of substantive political dimension, if you like, and academic dimension of what we're doing. And I just wondered if you had any kind of comments to make about that, framing it in that kind of, using that frame of urban indigeneity to think through what you've done.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, especially Chile is one of the countries in which the majority of the population is actually in urban centers. I think it reaches the 80%, something like that. Especially in the capital, in the metropolitan region of Santiago, which is really striking because, for example, when I got there, and I'm talking about 2017, I was talking to a colleague in the geography department, and he was asking what you came to research, and I said urban Mapuche, and he said there aren't any, and I was like, what do you mean? They are in the south. You have to go there. Maybe you find them in Temuco, but not in Santiago. So there is this, and also the idea that if there are Mapuche in Santiago, they are not Mapuche anymore, or they are not really Mapuche. So there is also, I think what the most interesting thing about this is how urban Mapucheness actually defies and challenges the very idea of indigeneity in itself. So, again, there's really, I love this kind of a sense of humor, and there is something called the Mapuchometro. I don't know if you ever heard about it. Like it's in social media, and so basically how people measure your Mapucheness in terms of traditional kind of stuff or language, or if you're able to speak language. So there are all kinds of jokes about this, but it's really a key thing to think about, especially the younger generations, how they go through like their sense of belonging that is constantly questioned, also in the South, also from traditional communities. So, I mean, not traditional rural communities. So I think it's really important to explore this kind of issues, and the very idea of the Mapuche diaspora is a concept that Mapuche scholars are putting forward, because they say if we think about diaspora, then we are saying that Mapuche history is actually is actually defies the very dichotomy between urban and rural. Also because also in urban studies, what's urban and what's rural now? Like, how do you measure that? So if you live in a rural community, but you have your phone all the time, what's that? Is that rural or urban? I mean, it's blurred, actually, it's ambiguous, and I think it's really important to bring this to the table, especially because of how Santiago thinks of itself of being white and being non-indigenous space, and it's simply not true. It is this idea of the proper city and the alien city that was set in the 19th century is really defined by this kind of work, and not only this work, that my project, but also the work of all the artists that have been collaborating and the activists that live in Santiago and work in Santiago.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions? And if people in the Zoom, or on Zoom, want to ask a question, just kind of unmute yourself and.
That's a question, comment. Going back to what you were saying about challenging the notion of Santiago as a kind of non-indigenous space, I'm thinking of the most iconic photo of the social unrest, basically in Plaza Baquedano. There's a woman climbing to the with a Mapuche flag, so I'm thinking, because you did your work immediately before. So how this kind of this reassessment of the urban space now, after all this conflict, which included kind of an important component of Mapuche activism, right? And clearly that photograph, I don't know if you remember the photograph. I don't know if we can Google it, but it was the most famous one, and it's clearly like in one of the main squares of Santiago. So thinking how does it resonate now your project with what came immediately after that?
This one.
Yeah. How does it resonate with the project in a way? Because you were experiencing through art, reclaiming the urban spaces, you know? So this is like also through art, through photograph, but at the same time it was happening during that time. I don't know how you see the connection.
No, I mean, yeah, that was one of the things. It was immediately before then, and some of the actions I didn't go into today, but some of the action that we also performed, like during one workshop with the Pedro de Olivia statue in the Plaza de Armas, for example, were so much similar to what happened afterwards. Not because we were visionaries, but because, well, if you address issues that are there just underneath everyday life, of course, then it's something that explodes immediately after. You can already sense it there, especially through art, I think. So it's really striking the kind of, it's also striking that while we were doing this work, it was impossible to imagine something like that, like the uprising, right? That kind of picture. And I also think that the way the revolt was named, like it was named La Revolta de los Mestizos, for example, which is really not common way to auto-identify in Chile. It's not, mestizaje is not something so like common as a form of identity. So we had lots of discussions about this with Roberto and Claudio recently, because they came here right after the no to the new constitution. And actually, one of the main reasons of the no was precisely the plurinationality, plurinationalidad. So it was really, well, sad, I have to say, but also interesting to reflect on how, so how can you interpret this kind of actions, like the Mapuche flag on Baquedano? So is this aesthetic, like addressing colonial monuments, is it an aesthetic action, and of course it's political in that it's because it's confronting power, or it's because it wants to change the very idea of the nation that is there. And probably the fact that the strong no, because it was super strong, that was given to this idea of the plurinationality, or also women rights, and I mean a lot of issues that were at the center of the the Constitutional Assembly, tells more about how this protest was, of course, very strong and of course super important, but maybe the difficulties about changing the national narrative is still there. You have this happening, but it's not so widespread, so I don't know, so strong. It's not strong enough, probably, which means there is a lot of work to be done. It doesn't mean that everything is lost, but that's what their reading of it. But I'm convinced that urban space was really key in the whole uprising, and I would like to go back and see how it changed, because it has changed a lot also in physical terms and visual terms. I don't know if I answered. It's really difficult for me to address that moment because it's so close and I haven't been there. So
no, but I was thinking of all the similarities between what you were doing and what happened.
Yeah.
Obviously, in a much more kind of radical and
many of the people that collaborate on the project were actually protagonists of the uprising as well. I mean, Roberto and Claudio both worked with the closely. So it's also, you know, it's also like a whole kind of connections there.
Anyone in the Zoom room want to ask a question? No? Maybe Valentina? You got your sleeve?
Yes, can I actually continue on the question they just made to you?
Yeah.
Because it's very interesting. I've been to Santiago in January 2019 for a marriage, so not for research related reasons, but I was shocked of how the whole city was covered in graffiti. The whole city, like the whole city center, and the statues had red eyes, no, as a signifying the fact that the police was shooting at the eyes of people. And it really looked like the city was being taken by a force that was opposing the city, that was against the city. So, and it reminded me the intervention you made with the monument of Pedro de Valdivia. So I had, maybe it's again the same question, but I was curious to know more about the alliance between Mapuche and non-Mapuche people, because it looked like the same symbols were attacked in the political uprising. How it was felt, and also Claudio and Roberto brought the constitution in Mapuche when they came, no? So how it's actually, and they told me, of course you don't speak Mapuche, but get one copy. So to me, it felt again like a taking possession of a colonial space through a performance, no? It was a very performative act. So yeah, if you can, because I'm sure you talked with them about this, how did this alliance work? Like suddenly it wasn't only Mapuche people, suddenly it was half of the country wanting to take over the city.
Well, I mean, I think that also, if we want to think about the uprising, we should start a bit before the moment when it I mean, a lot before, but especially like while I was there and while we were working on the project, there was a massive protest really massive that they told me they haven't seen in years, when one young Mapuche was shot and was murdered, was killed in the south, and he was part of one of the more active indigenous communities there, fighting for the land, but he was just on his truck going back home with a 15-year-old friend of him, and he was shot on his back. And that's not the first time. It happened several times during the last years after the democracy was restored in Chile. So Mapuche people have always been protesting about this kind of events. But that time it was so massive, the participation, and was so clearly not only Mapuche protesting about it. So I think that also during the years, the Mapuche movement have been so strong and strongly present in public debate that it was like seen as one of the main political actors still fighting for rights and for many things that are important for the whole citizenship. I saw it also because of what my work before was with Mapuche political exiles in Europe. And I also saw it in terms of the groups here in Europe, that they shifted, many non-indigenous shifted from their activism against Pinochet dictatorship to supporting the Mapuche movement. So there is an exchange there that is decades long. But it's not the only reason, and I'm not a political analyst, so I cannot really say nothing final. But my feeling is that, of course, there was an alliance, and probably because Mapuche movement was actually able to question a lot of things that no other political force was able to address, or not enough. I mean, the students, yes, of course, that was also another strong actor in this arena, but also the Mapuche have always been. And I remember that protest was so strong, and also people responded a lot because it was repressed really badly, and this was like 6 months before, no, 1 year before the uprising, and people were just commenting on it in a way that I've never seen among non-indigenous. So it was really, I think it was something that had to do with it. And then, of course, there was alliance, and of course there is an attempt to rethink the whole nation, but then, yeah, something went wrong in the final book. So, but that's a long. I mean, it's too long to address probably here, and I'm not the perfect person to do that. Claudia will be.
So just wondering about the use of the word jumbled. Obviously, I haven't read the introduction, I just skip through a little bit. So I'm guessing that it partly relates to the kind of discussion that you have. I don't know the word jumbled. Yeah, so I'm guessing it has to do with that. But I was wondering more specifically how it relates to the kind of urban context, and how it relates or not to the kind of mapping element of it, which might be seen as a gesture of being non-jumbled in a way, like a sort of a process of ordering space in some way, and whether those two things, how they sort of fit together, if you like, the idea of jumbling something, the idea of mapping something as being either in tension with each other or complementary to each other in some way. I hadn't really sort of thought it through, but I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Wow, thanks. So I think there are two answers to this, probably. One is related to the Champuria word. That's probably, I mean, Champuria can be associated to mestizo, mestizaje. It can also be related to the Chixi word in the Bolivian Andes that it's in many of Silvia Rivera Casagrande reflections. So it is historically, it relates to a blood mixture, racial mixture, basically. But it has been reappropriated and used since, I think, 1 decade, more or less, but especially during the last few years, by artists and activists within urban context to signify how their own identity is not pure, basically, but how this is actually also the way they see the world and also the way they engage with the world. So in the way they can be still Mapuche while not being pure, because most of them are of mixed descent, or because they engage with spaces that are not necessarily indigenous, and so how they play with this kind of different belongings and different manifestation of themselves and their own history. So basically, in that is related to the idea of the motley city. Basically, there is also in Veronica Gago, which I actually read after finishing the book, my fault. But yes, very much related to the word of Silvia Rivera Casagrande. The other aspect about the mapping and the jumbling something, I think they are complementary. Also because the mapping went through the body mostly and performing. And then, of course, it resulted in physical maps because we had to find a way to fix that somewhere and somehow. But I would say the two things complement one another. It was problematic in different instances. For example, the video of the performance that we've seen only a little bit, which is another way of fixing things to photography and video. It was very long and very difficult to edit because the complexity of taking something ephemeral into a fixed form was there all the time. So we couldn't decide on anything, basically. We couldn't decide what we wanted to. So this is one of the issues that I don't think is possible to resolve. Also because even if you use different materials and different forms of representation, the text is still a different kind of media, and also it's a different kind of audience because it's a text, it's a book written in English, while the performance and the performative kind of mapping that we were doing involving the audience there was very much related to wanting to speak to a Mapuche audience in the city. So that's what the audience of the book had in mind from the start. So when you get to the book, then you change the audience. So that was one of the complexities that I don't think we resolved. It's just there.
Any other questions? No?
Yeah, perhaps in relation to just what you just said about reception and the kind of audience, the difference in audience between the book and the performance. I wonder if you could speak a bit about the kinds of responses you got during the performance from audience members, if there was anything kind of surprising that you found about that.
Yeah, sure. So we had the performance staged 5 times. It was planned to stage it 4 times, but we had so many people that wanted to come that we had to add 1 more, and then unfortunately we couldn't have any more because my time there was ended, and also the funding and everything else. We didn't really record the audience responses, but in terms of what we felt there and what we experienced by talking to people afterwards, it was a very warm answers from Mapuche people in the city, especially because they were the main person invited from the other component of the group, because it was really moving to them to have their story there, just in a public space, because the whole thing was in a public space. So it was striking for them to see it as something happening in the public space. Also, what I noticed was that there was sometimes when we had most of the public, most of the audience that were non-indigenous. And this is only based to their surnames, so it can be wrong, but it is one of the ways you can assess that in Chile. Their way of responding to things was different. For example, I noticed that they laughed at different times. They found different things fun or not fun, depending on where they came from. This was one impression. I'm seeing this completely out of my impression. It's not any kind of research that I did or data that I collected. And one of the most striking reaction was when we were in the Plaza de Armas, and we had this lady coming into and disrupting the Mapuche guide historical tour within, in the plaza, and she was, of course, part of the performers, but for the first 30 seconds, people wouldn't know. So there was this element of surprise. And one time, one person didn't realize that she was part of the performance. So she started arguing with her really badly. Like she got really upset, so much that we had to stop everything and to just reassure her, because she was completely drawn into the thing and couldn't believe that she couldn't let the guide speak. And it was really interesting how actually fiction and non-fiction come together and what can happen from there. It was a really emotional reaction. Yeah, and then the municipality that didn't give us the space was also kind of interesting in terms of how you deal with audiences in different spaces, because this only happened in the upper class sector of the city. Thanks.
Okay, I think we're 6:30, so we can probably draw things to a close. So, yeah, thank you very much, Olivia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Valentina,
Thank you, Valentina.
Thank you, everyone in the Zoom room, and we'll be circulating the news of art. What is on the screening? And that is in 2 weeks' time? Yeah, the 9th of November, we have a film screening. We'll circulate details so everyone can find out. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone in the Zoom room. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Valentina. Bye.
Thanks. All right.